everyone, and welcome back to the summit. In this session, we'll be diving into how your parenting impacts your kids' mental health. And I am super excited to be hosting someone who's truly special to me as well as the entire strategic parenting team. Please give a warm welcome to Deborah McPhillamy. Hi, Deb. Welcome
Hi,
back to the show.
Stella. Thank you so much. It's good to be back.
And it's been such a pleasure working with you for the past few years almost now, right?
Likewise, likewise.
And of course, to speak to you today. I cannot wait to dig in. But before we do get into this super interesting topic, could you please introduce yourself and tell our viewers more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So, my name is Deborah McPhillamy, and I'm an author and a speaker. And I specialize in a topic called emotional intelligence. And one of the things that I really love doing is to mentor parents to help them to understand their children's emotions and their behavior and how they can help themselves as well to be less stressed and less anxious as parents as well.
Yeah. And we're so glad to have you. I have so many questions, but I'll start with that, Deborah. You firmly believe that kids learn much more from who their parents are and what they do than from what they say. And I'm sure many parents are nodding their heads right now because it's absolutely true. But what happens when you're not feeling happy with yourself and struggle to find the time or willpower really to make some meaningful changes? How can we get back on track and inspire our kids when we feel stuck? What would you say?
Yeah, because as you say, because children learn more from watching us. So that whole role modeling. And so often, if we're not communicating to our children or not being open and honest with them, children will immediately assume that they are the problem because our children look at us and they think that everything is about them. It's just the way human beings are. We're quite narcissistic as we're growing up. So when you're not feeling yourself or you're feeling down in the dumps or unhappy, the most important thing is to be honest with your children and just say to them, I might look a little bit down today, or I'm feeling unhappy, or I'm feeling disappointed or sad, but it's not about you. Because if you don't tell them that it's not about them, they will fill in the blanks and automatically think it's about them. And then the other thing to tell children is to say, just because I'm struggling with this at the moment doesn't mean that you need to struggle with this because we're all different. We all on, we have a different life. We're on a different journey, as some people would call it, because often parents can feel down in the dumps, or they could feel anxious, or they could be worrying about something. And so to say to children, as grown-ups, we have grown-up problems. We have things that we've got to think about that you don't have to think about, but you can still go off and you can have fun and you can enjoy yourself, or you can push yourself harder because we have got different dreams. We've got different things that we want to do in life. So I think it's all about that open communication, just so that children know that it's not about them.
Nice. But often, I mean, when we're yelling, when we're nervous,
Yeah.
that does happen, and they do think it's their fault. And
Yes.
it can really, mess with them. They might internalize those feelings and
Mm.
really blame themselves on some level. So, how does this really affect their confidence as they grow up?
Well, it could tremendously, especially as parents. And I know I'm very guilty of that myself when I was younger and raising my children. When you shout at them, and you're doing it because you're so stressed or you're fearful or you're impatient or you've run out of energy or whatever, we tend to shout at them. And then their brain shuts down and then their nervous system kicks in. And it really has a massive effect on them because we don't like noise. Children don't want to disappoint their parents. Children don't want to let you down. Because the thing about kids is that disappointment equals not being loved. So if we as parents shout at our children or behave erratically, and children take that on board, not only does it make them feel unloved or that they are disappointing you as a parent, but it also affects their nervous system. And so children then become anxious. So if you, for instance, shouted at a child one day, their nervous system is now on high alert. Now they're almost like expecting that it could happen tomorrow. What happens next time? It makes them jumpy. So there's a lot of things that happen. And obviously, a lot of those memories and thoughts get stuck. And then the mind keeps telling the body to do it. The body expects it to happen, and it creates a bit of this vicious cycle,
Right.
and it perpetuates itself. So I think it's important to be aware of not only how you feel about yourself and your own behavior, but to have that understanding of why we don't want to shout at our kids, why we don't want to take our stress out on them, why we don't want to cause anxiety, because you could set up your children for lifelong problems.
Mm. And parents also often worry that social media is the biggest force to
Mm,
that's shaping their kids' opinions and values. And while it is a big player, we can argue that parents actually hold more powerful cards. Am I
yeah.
right? And what would you say are some of the areas where parents definitely have more control than social media?
I do think social media does play a huge role, but as you say, parents, especially if you've got a good relationship with your children, you have much more power. And when I talk about a good relationship, it's got to be one that's sort of a cooperative, loving, accepting, non-judgmental relationship. Because if you've got a relationship with your kids where they're scared of you, and it's all about their grades and it's all about them just performing, you're not going to form that bond. You're not going to have that trust. A child's not going to feel that they are comfortable with you. They're not going to feel that they can really trust you and be safe with you emotionally. But when you have that good relationship with that great foundation, then you have more influence over your children than social media, because you can then say to them, well, social media isn't actually real. It's fake. It's like watching a movie. It's not real. Because if you think about social media, a lot of people portray things, all the good things about what's going on, or their successes. People don't talk about their failures. They don't talk about the bad things that are happening. So everything is sort of in this pink, um, looking through pink glasses, rosy eyed glasses, as they call it. It's not reality. So it's important for parents to bring that message across to children and say that that's not the truth. The truth is right here, but you've got to build that foundation of trust between your kids. Otherwise, they're not going to listen to you.
Agree. And a big part of what you do, Deborah, is emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
and not just for kids, but for adults too.
Mm.
Now, Deb, do you think it's possible for parents to raise an emotionally intelligent kid if they're not, emotionally stable themselves?
They can, but what would happen is that you have an imbalance. So you're going to have a child that's actually more intelligent than the adult. But I saw something really interesting a couple of weeks ago. This family that I work with, and they've been doing a lot of emotional intelligence, but the one parent is not as emotionally intelligent. But the child has been practicing emotional intelligence since he was about 4, and it was so interesting because there was a scenario where somebody was being bullied at school, and I was trying to explain to the parent. The parent was getting really frustrated, couldn't understand it. And the more I'm trying to explain to the parent, it's not personal, this is what happens, blah, 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 the more the parent couldn't get it. And eventually I turned to this 8-year-old child and I say to him, do you understand what I'm saying? And he says, yes, completely. And I said to him, well, explain it to me. And he said, well, when somebody bullies you, it's not about you. What a better response to have is to look at them and say, are you okay? Are you having a bad day? Can I help you with something? And it was so interesting because I looked at this child and he was so emotionally intelligent. And then he actually went and explained that to his parent. And I was just like, wow, this is incredible. And we've seen it in a couple of the schools that we've taught it as well. The teachers will always give me feedback and they say the stuff that the kids come up with. She says at the end of the year, when they have their parent teacher association meetings and stuff, the stories that they tell where the children are actually teaching the parents how to be emotionally intelligent. So it's definitely possible. But if you're all on the same wavelength, you are going to have better relationships. So it's more, should I say, preferred that the parent is emotionally intelligent as well, but you can definitely have it in exactly the way that I've described it.
Those are amazing stories.
Crazy,
And
well, not crazy, crazy good.
Very good, yeah, definitely. So besides kids' mental health, it looks like parents are carrying a heavy load as well. You know,
Mm,
a lot of kids tend to blame their moms and dads
yeah.
for their mental health issues, and that can quickly lead to victim mindset. So,
Yeah.
how can we help our kids to go, to let go of that blame and forgive us and take charge of their own lives?
Oh, it's such a hard one, isn't it? Because I think I was one of those people. I was like, it was because of my upbringing that, but then you do get, we all do it. And then I think you get to a point where you develop empathy. And so empathy is one of the biggest topics in emotional intelligence, because empathy is really putting yourself in the shoes of somebody else and realizing that what they did wasn't personal, or they only did the best that they could with what they had. And I think so it's very important to explain that. And I remember saying this to my kids one day because, you know, kids look at parents as their heroes, and they look at them as if you bigger, you older, so you should know everything. You should know better. You should know better. Why did you do that to me? But I remember saying to my teenagers once, I said, you know what? I'll let you in on a secret. I said, us adults, we're just big kids, just like you, trying to find our own way. Just because we're bigger or older, or we've lived longer than you, doesn't mean we always have the solutions, because we're also evolving as people. Because if you think about parenting back 10, 20 years ago, I mean, parents still used to physically hit their children, and now we're going, no, we don't do that anymore, because science has proven and shown how harmful it is to a child. So we also evolving. So it comes down to, once again, being so open and honest and transparent with your children, and saying to them, I know I've made a lot of mistakes, but I didn't know better. That's the way I was raised, or that's the way I was taught, but I'm sorry. Please, can you forgive me? Can you let it go? And then also to ask them to help you, because that's something I remember doing as well when I was introduced to emotional intelligence, having this realization of all the mistakes I made in the past, and then saying to my kids, listen, I'm going to mess up, but I really want to do better. So if I fall back into my old habits, just tell me. I'm not going to be offended. I'm not going to get upset with you, but just tell me so that I can do better. So it's more that sort of cooperative way of raising children and being a family, instead of, as you're saying, going into that victimhood, because it's easy to go into victimhood. But if they have more of an understanding of you, they'll find it easier to forgive and to be a little bit more lenient with you and to let go and move on.
Right, right. And what are some of your favorite practical tips or resources that parents can use to actively teach emotional intelligence to both themselves and their kids?
You can do it in like a really fun way. One of the funnest things I like doing is that when you're watching a movie together with kids, you can say to them, tell me when you see an emotion. You kind of bring out the different emotions, and you say, we're looking for sadness or anxiety or happiness or any honesty or anything. You can give them a whole list of emotions, and then say, so then look for it and stop and say, when you see it, point it out, because that's a really good way, because they're seeing it on a screen and they're seeing what it looks like. They're also feeling it, because you know what it's like when we're watching a movie, we can feel those emotions, and then they're able to label it. So that's one of the tips that I would give. And then the other one is through stories, because stories, you can really tune into the emotions of the characters. And it's just such a lovely, easy way to help children to understand and use their minds while they're listening to a story or reading a story, to point out those different ways how people are handling a situation.
And it seems like one important tip for building a good relationship with their kids is validating their emotions, not just teaching
Yeah.
them, but validating theirs. But I feel like this idea isn't always very clear.
Mm.
Um, what does it really mean to validate their feelings. Can you give us, I don't know, a simple example of what to do and what not to do, maybe when a kid does something wrong or messes
Yeah.
up? It's an F, or I don't know, they didn't study or something.
Yeah. Because validating simply means that you're acknowledging that feeling. It means that you're accepting it. And I think so sometimes, for instance, like my granddaughter the other day, she suddenly developed a fear of something in the bathroom, which is weird, right? I mean, it's like this little funny ornament that is sitting there. It's very friendly. It's a cow with little dangly legs, and it's the cutest thing I've ever bought. But she's now suddenly developed a fear of that. So now, if I was not validating her or invalidating her, I would go, that's ridiculous. Why are you scared of the cow? Look at its happy face. It's absolutely fine. You've got nothing to be scared of. So that's invalidating. So to validate it would just to go, okay, I'm acknowledging she's scared. I don't know why she's scared of it. And saying to her, I can see you scared of it. What do you think we can do so that you're not scared of it? And so what we did was we removed it out of the bathroom. So that's sort of one of those examples, because especially with children, it's always about fear. Or if they say to you, there's monsters under my bed, oh, don't be ridiculous. Monsters don't exist. That's invalidating. Or you can say, okay, would it help if I come and have a little look in the bedroom, look under the bed? Would it help if I put a nightlight on? The other thing that's really fun to do is create a potion. So I do this for my grandchildren. I'll say to them, let's make a monster free potion, and I'll put in some water. We'll make it together, and I'll add like a little bit of lavender oil, like a drop or two of lavender oil. And then I say, whenever you're worried in your room, you just need to spray it in the room, and that's going to be monster free. Monsters won't come in here. So and then obviously you adapt it for the age, right? But you can understand now what I mean about validating. It's like accepting that every single person on this planet has emotions, but they feel them in a different way for different reasons. And just because they feeling it and you not feeling it doesn't make it wrong. So it's just helping them through and not judging them for that emotion.
Right. You gave us an example of, fear, which is really hard to overcome. But what about when a kid really, messed up, like he got a bad grade when he wasn't studying, or we didn't want to buy a toy and he gives up a tantrum? What about those particular examples?
Okay, so there's a few things that you can do. So, for instance, with grades, I think it's quite important for parents to keep reassuring their children that they just need to try their best. I think because there's this weird thing where some parents put so much pressure on their children to get good grades that they either shut down and they just can't, they bend under the pressure. And then that fear kicks in of that they're now going to disappoint their parent. So if you reassure them and say, you know what, as long as you try your best, as long as you know you did your best, I am going to love and accept you regardless. That's all children need. They need to know that even if they do something terrible, that you will forgive them and that you will still love them. Because if they don't feel loved and accepted, that's when they go somewhere else to go and look for that love and acceptance. So it's very important for children to know that they can feel that they can fall back on you, that, and I'm not saying this to, now say don't encourage your children to get good grades, but what I'm saying is children need to know that they're still going to be loved and accepted even when they mess up and when they fail, so that they're going to come to you and not go to a gang or go somewhere else where they'll feel like, they'll be accepted there. So that's the one thing. There was another question you asked me. What was it?
The tantrum, if
Oh,
we don't
a
buy
toy.
them a toy or something, yeah.
Yeah. So another way to handle, so if it's a tantrum and they want a toy, is that almost tap into their imagination in a way. So you could say to them, I so wish I could buy you that toy. I would love to buy you that toy, but I just can't do it right now. It's not in the budget. You don't want them to get money issues where you tell them you can't afford things or have them worrying about money. But you can rather say to them, I wish I could. Oh, I wish I could do that for you. I wish I could buy that for you. I wish I could buy you the whole world, but I just don't have the budget right now. But why not? Let's put it on the list. We put it on the list. So obviously, if they're young and they still believe in Santa Claus or Father Christmas, you can say, let's put it on the list and see if we can get it for you for Christmas. or let's put it on the list and maybe we can save and we can get it for you for your birthday. And then that's also a nice way to introduce to children about money and how they can save. Maybe they can do some chores around the house, or they could water the neighbor's garden or wash cars, depending on ages and stuff. But it's also a really good way for them to then understand how money works, that it's not just freely available. And it's not because you don't love them that you're not giving them that toy. It's just a matter of economics.
Yeah, and that's the most important
Yeah.
lesson here, right?
Yeah.
Many parents grew up, I mean, we grew up in different times with older parenting styles that don't work for today's kids, like you
Yeah.
already mentioned. What's the best way to bridge that gap, and connect with your kids and learn from each other, despite those differences?
Yeah, I think that parenting has really moved more into a more leadership style. So if you think about, when you run a big organization, or if you're an entrepreneur and you're breaking new ground or whatever, you're a leader. And so you want people to follow you. You don't want to tell them what to do. You don't want to come down on them, because nobody feels comfortable with a manager. There's a big difference between a manager and a leader. And so parenting is very much about leading. So role modeling, being emotionally intelligent, showing them how to do it. It's that whole different style. And then also it's all about understanding that even though your child might be a lot younger than you, it's about respect. Because if you respect them, they are going to respect you. And I think the old styles were always like, I'm your father, I'm your mother, you will respect me. No, it doesn't work that way. You've got to respect them, because you've got to show them what respect means. How do they know what respect is? So you're demanding respect, you're demanding that they trust you, but how would they know what it is? So you've got to show them by example. And I think that is definitely the way that parenting is moving towards. And it's also, when you're leading and when you're respecting, your children's nervous systems are going to relax, because there's so much anxiety at the moment, because they're so scared that they're going to fail or disappoint. But a leader shows they don't rule. It's not like a ruler where the king or the queen is in charge kind of thing. So I would definitely encourage people to look more as their role as a parent of being one of being a leader and also being more respectful.
Mhm, mhm. And when it comes to teaching emotional intelligence, starting early can probably make a big difference, right?
Yeah.
But what about teens these days? I came across a statistic that really shocked me. I
Mm.
think in 2022, half of all teenagers in England either witnessed or were victims of violence,
Mm.
which is shocking. So, how can parents teach their teens not only to be more empathetic, but also to defend themselves without resorting to the same kind of violence force?
Yeah, it's such a hard one, isn't it? Because teenagers operate purely on emotion, until they get to 24, 25, when that rational brain kicks in. So it's a really hard one. But I think it comes down once again to that interaction between parents and child. Because the thing with teens is that as parents, we tend to want to leave them alone, because they are so full of emotions, they're so hormonal, they're so moody, they're rebelling, which is completely normal. It's natural for them to rebel, because that's them starting to become independent. So they start pulling away from the parent. So we either go one of two ways. We either become overbearing and become really controlling, or we pull away and we just go, oh, you know what, it's a phase, and then you'll just let them be. And so I think it's very important to actually draw closer to your teenagers. And sometimes you've almost got to be like a little bit persistent, like when they're in their rooms and they're sulking or their behavior has changed, it's important that you keep sowing those seeds and saying, I can see you having a bad day. I can see you don't want to talk to me, but I'm here for you. And also then giving them stories of when you were a teenager and saying to them, I know what it's like to be a teenager. You want to fit in, and sometimes it means you resort to violence, or you've seen violence, or it's very confusing. Relate to them so that they can understand that you were a teenager as well, and that you struggled with those. So your teenager, you want to lean into it, but not be overbearing and controlling, so that they will talk to you and that you can share experiences as well. But I do think what's important, Spella, is that parents need to, from a young age already, instill this whole violence thing with them, because they're playing games and video games that are exceptionally violent from a really, really young age, and they don't understand that it's not reality. They think that, well, if they kill somebody, they're going to get up again, or stab somebody and they're going to get up again, because that's what they see in games. So all of that stuff is imprinted on their mind, and then they don't understand the concept of it. You see some horror stories where teenagers have got involved in violence, and then they're so surprised because the person died or the person got badly injured, because they think they're going to get up again. So it's very important, like from a young age already, to start instilling that and saying, you know, they that is violence and that can actually happen in real life, so that they know what they're actually looking at. So I'm not saying try and control everything that they watch, but have those discussions and explain to them about what they're seeing and what they're watching and the games that they're playing, so that they don't get a distortion of reality and games and what they're seeing online.
Yeah, that makes sense. But Deborah, unfortunately, not every parent has the luxury to
Mm,
work on their emotional intelligence, while they're just
yeah.
trying basically to survive, right? And this issue probably isn't just happening in isolation, it affects the whole school environment and
Mm.
society as a whole. What would you say are some of the things that we as a community and as fellow parents can do to inspire change?
I think, even if you can't afford it or you don't have the time, just by having that awareness of how important emotional intelligence is. So, you know, emotional intelligence just makes your job easier as a parent. So if you think about it in that way, because I think a lot of people go, oh my gosh, now I've got to learn all this new stuff and it's so scientific and it's this and it's that, and I don't have the time for it. I don't have the money for it. But if you just break it down into little chunk size bites and also understand why it's important. So, why you have with yourself, which means that it then prevents mental health and emotional health issues. It also prevents a lot of physical health. So, if a child or a grown up is constantly in a state of anxiety and stress, that's going to eventually erode your systems down, and it's going to affect your health profoundly. So, if you always bear that in mind, why it's important. And then it's also important for the relationship and the communication. So a child can tell you what is going on. So if they're feeling depressed or frustrated or worried or suicidal or whatever that is, when they understand that the emotions are caused by the thinking and what's going on in your body, then it gives you a better understanding. So I first wanted to clarify that, because a lot of people are put off by emotional intelligence because they're thinking, I don't want to do it, it's too much work. Now, to bring it back, how you can then embrace that is just to do it in those chunk size bites. As I said, just take 5 minutes a day. And you can do things like when you're driving in the car, taking the kids to school, you can talk about emotions, how they're feeling. Oh, you look sad. Are you sad? When they're having a bath, find books that they can read them together. Because think about it this way, if you're going to get a book in the library, it's going to take you 10 minutes to read, you can incorporate a lesson into that book while you are reading that story to them. I know that we're all busy, but I refuse to accept that we can't find 10 minutes a day to just help our children. So if we understand why we're helping them, everybody watches movies. Find a movie, talk about it. You don't have to sit there and be quiet. Even when you're brushing teeth, I say to kids or parents, stick something on the mirror that says how awesome you are or remind you how wonderful you are, so that they don't wake up feeling grumpy and bad about themselves, but they've got that little reminder there. So there's all these little fun things that you can do 5 to 10 minutes a day to start incorporating that awareness and to start opening up the communication between you and your child.
Beautiful. Great resources, Deb. Now let's move to the rapid fire questions. If you have to sum up your best parenting advice ever in 1 minute, what would that be?
Love and accept your child just as they are. Do not judge them. Do not try and make them into something that they're not. Work with their personality. So develop all their strengths, ignore their weaknesses, and just let them be who they're meant to be.
Beautiful. What's the one tough truth about self reflection that parents usually try to escape?
When we've made mistakes, we feel so horrible about ourselves, then we don't forgive ourselves and we can't move on. So, and then guilt sets in, right? And when you're feeling guilty, then you push the people away from you in your life. So don't be so hard on yourself. You had the knowledge you had at the time, you've done the best that you could. And so, yeah, just let go and forgive and move on.
Beautiful. If you could give your kids just one thing, what would that be?
If I could give my kids just one thing, it's that I would always want them to know that they're the best thing that ever happened to me. I think children change your life. They change your world. They add so much joy. They help you grow as a person. They make life worth living. And if it was me giving that to my children, that's exactly what I would say to them. They've changed my life and I wouldn't have it any other way.
What's the perfect thing for parents to say to their kids after huge failure?
I love you. It's okay. You're going to get through this. And tomorrow we're going to get up. It's a new day and you'll get through it and I will get through it. And tomorrow means you can try again. You get another chance.
And what's the one important thing that parents tend to forget that you cannot put the price on?
I think parents forget that they were children once as well. And they also think that they had a manual when their kids were born, and they didn't. So, and I think parents just are so hard on themselves. And they just need to sometimes remember that they were a child as well, and to remember it from that child's perspective and say, well, what did I feel then? How would I have wanted to be treated differently? And just to be more kinder to themselves and their families in general.
Well, Deb, this was truly inspiring, and I bet the parents watching are leaving with a lot of takeaways. Thank you so much for being again with us and being such an inspiration also for our work. Thank you for this time.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.